For these next problems, we are going to take congruent triangles and use the congruent properties to find missing pieces. So what do I mean? If I know two triangles are congruent, then like we said from the start, that means that their sides and their angles are all the same. So all I have to do is match up corresponding parts, and I can use angle measures or side distances to tell the size of the other triangle. Let's see what that actually means. So here, I'm given this congruency statement and our two triangles, triangle STW and triangle BFN. The first one I want to find is BN. What is BN equal to? Well, what is BN congruent to? What is its corresponding piece? BN, B is the first letter, N is the last letter, corresponds with S is the first letter, W is the last letter, so it corresponds with SW. That's this side length right here. Well, lucky for us, we know that SW is 9 centimeters. So because BN and SW are congruent, their size must be the same. So I can say that BN is also 9 centimeters. For the next one, TW. Well, TW are the last two letters. So I need then to correspond with FN. So we've got TW is right here. That corresponds with FN. Again, lucky for us, I know that FN is 14 centimeters. And because FN is congruent to TW, they must be equal. So this one must also be 14 centimeters. All right, one more. The last one we're going to do, I'm looking for BF. Well, BF, there's really only one other option, right? It has to be corresponding with ST. You can always check that using our congruent statement here. Is it BF and ST? Yep. And again, lucky for us, we know that ST is 17 centimeters. So because they're congruent, BF needs to also be 17 centimeters. Now we can do the same thing with the angles too. Now for the angles, that's really matching them up exactly as they're listed. S corresponds with B. T corresponds with F. T, F. And W corresponds with N. So W and N. So here in the first one, we're asked to find the measure of angle W. Well, here's W right here. And W corresponds with N. So because angle N is 82 degrees, I know that the measure of angle W also must be 82 degrees. All right, for the next one, I'm looking for the measure of angle B. B is up here. We said B was corresponding with S. Again, lucky for us, we know that S is 67 degrees. So B must also be 67 degrees. Now, the very last one here, the measure of angle F. Angle F corresponds with angle T, but unfortunately, we're not given either of them. So, what is something that we could use to find the missing angle? Well, if you remember your triangle properties, we know that all three angles in a triangle must sum to 180 degrees. So since I know the two other angles in the triangle, right? We know that angle N is 82, but we also just said that angle B is 67. I can use the triangle sum theorem to solve for the measure of angle F. So what I'll do is 180 minus 82 and minus 67. I'm going to subtract the two angles that I know, and that leaves me with 31. So angle F must be 31 degrees. Now, of course, if angle F is 31 degrees, that means that angle T would also have to be 31 degrees. All right, let's try this next one together as well. So we're labeling all of them. We have some corresponding pieces, but there's actually something else here that is special to note as well. Notice that in the triangle GHJ, these two sides are marked as congruent. Remind me, what triangle has two congruent sides? If you said isosceles, you are right. This is an example of an isosceles triangle. So I would expect that the triangle it is congruent to is also isosceles. But we're going to match up those corresponding lines. So the first thing I'm looking for is GJ. So G is the first letter, J is the last letter. So it corresponds with XZ. So we've got G, J, and XZ. Since XZ is 18 feet, I know GJ must also be 18 feet. All right, the next one, I'm looking for XY. XY goes from the first letter to the middle. So in the other triangle, it goes from G to H. So GH and XY are congruent, and therefore XY is 27 feet. All right, and now this very last one, ZY. Well, ZY must be congruent to JH. Now, I don't know for sure JH, it's not labeled, but I do actually know it for sure because in an isosceles triangle, these two sides are congruent, which means that HJ is also 27 since HG is 27. Now I know HJ, so now I can say that ZY must also be 27 feet. Now, what about these angles? The first angle is angle H. Notice H is the point where the pink and blue lines meet, right? So if you're color coding your paper, you can use these colors to help you match up those corresponding points. If you don't have any colors, you're going to go back to the corresponding statement. H is in the middle, Y is in the middle. These two are congruent, which means that because angle Y is 38 degrees, the measure of angle H is also 38 degrees. Now, for the next two, angle Z and angle J, I only know 38 degrees. But what I do know is that there is another property of an isosceles triangle. And that is that the angles that are opposite of the isosceles, of the two sides that are congruent, are also congruent to each other. So that means that these angles are congruent here. And then these angles must also be congruent. So that helps us to find the angles that we want. Because again, now I can use the triangle sum theorem. How is that going to work? Well, I know that all three together equal 180. And I know that one of them is 38. So I'm going to do 180 and subtract away the one that I know. And that's 142. I also know that the two remaining angles are congruent. So they must be the same size. So from here, if I do 142 and divide it into two equal pieces, that tells me that each of those angles is 71 degrees. So we just found the measure of angle Z is 71 degrees. And now J corresponds with Z, so it must also be 71 degrees. All right, now here's an example where we throw in some expressions to also solve these. So the first thing is I'm going to go through and actually color code everything. And maybe this will help us see how to do it. So I'm going to start at U because that's the first letter. U is going to be green. And then I go to the first letter here, T, so I'm going to color code it green. All right, the next letter is V, so I'll color code that orange. And then S, I will color code this orange. So all the colors are corresponding. And the last one is W, so I'll do W and then R. R. And now for the side. So I'm going to connect the green and orange. Green and orange. So these sides are congruent. Then I'm going to connect the orange and purple. Orange and purple. So these sides are congruent. And the last one we'll do green and purple. Green and purple. And so what colors allow you to do is to set up your congruent triangles one time. And now you can just match up those colors instead of going back to your congruency statements every time. And so for some of you, it might be really helpful to get some colors and to be able to do this during this unit. Now, I need to find the values of X, Y, and Z. So if you notice, let's start with X. X is right here, and it represents 12x minus 7, represents the side UV. In order to solve for X, I need to have something to set 12x minus 7 equal to. I want to say 12x minus 7 equals something else. What else does that side equal? Notice UV is congruent to TS, right? They're both marked with those tick marks. So because these two sides are congruent, I know their lengths are the same. So because we know UV is congruent to TS, I can set up an equation and replace UV with 12x minus 7 and say it's equal to TS, which is 53. And now I'm just solving this. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. I get 12x equals 60. Divide by 12. And x equals 5. And now it's a similar process to find y and z. Notice y is right here. 5y minus 33, and that represents the side RS. And RS is corresponding, which one is RS congruent to? It is corresponding with WV. So I'm going to set these two equal then. So RS is 5y minus 33. Set it equal to 57. And now I want to solve this for y. So we've got to first add 33 to both sides so that it'll cancel out here, and I get 5y equals 57 plus 33 is 90. And now we want to get rid of that 5, so I'm going to divide both sides by 5, and I get y equals 18. And now the last one, I am comparing UW with TR. So we know UW is congruent to TR. UW is 3z plus 14, and TR is 50. So I set them equal, and now I solve. I'm going to subtract over 14. And I get 3z equals 36. Next thing I want to do is divide both sides by 3. And z equals 12. And so now we've just found x, y, and z. On the next slide in your Desmos, go ahead and give number 7 a shot and plug in what you found.